Hi, I'm Blessing. I'm a second year, and my question is, what do you think is the most important lesson students can learn while they try to integrate faith with their education? Thank you.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Prof. My name is Shane, and my friend Spence Hackney and I are very grateful you're here. Thanks for coming along and listening. And we take questions from students like you just heard from Blessing, and then we ask them to Christian professors. And our goal is to help encourage Christ-centered conversations on the college campus. So thank you for joining us. And we get to hear part 2 now of Karen Petersen's interview. Karen is the president at Hendrix College. And before we get started, I have a few requests. Would you take a minute and just subscribe or like to the podcast wherever you are listening, and share it with a friend, share it with a college student you think might be encouraged by it. And so, well, let's get started. Here is part 2 of our interview with Dr. Karen Petersen.
What a great question, Blessing, and what a great name. So, I've seen students do some remarkable things in my career. I took students to Israel for, I think, 8 years as part of a study abroad program. It was just the best experience of my career has been being able to travel with students. And there was this one particular year where I had just a group of young women who were committed Christ followers, just lovely, joy-filled people, and they infused joy into our trip in a way that I'd never seen before. And it wasn't because they were preaching, and it wasn't because we were going to church, because this was an international conflict class. But the joy they brought was, you could feel it, you could see it, you could hear it and taste it. And there were other students on that trip, and at least one of them who was not a Christian. And ultimately, within the next year or so, he ended up in my office and sat down across from me. And he said, "I want what you guys have.
Really?
I want what they have." Right. And so those students weren't preaching.
Yeah.
They were just being joy-filled believers. And as a result, he became a Christ follower.
Wow.
Yeah.
As that. So the answer is, show that joy. Be that person that Christ has created you to be, and show other people what that does in your life, and be real too. Don't be fake.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't that fake joy, like everything's fine, everything's good, I'm all right all the time. No, this was real joy that also includes moments of vulnerability and tension and challenge and tears. Just be real and let people see God through you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I say it like it's easy, because it's not. I know it's not. So Blessing, I recognize it's not easy. Do it anyway.
Great. And you shared that you've been in process with all this yourself. So that's helpful for me. I love this emphasis you have on joy, and even your college has. So that's one takeaway for me to want to live out of joy. We
need more of that in our world.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's such a beautiful, joy is such a beautiful thing to experience and to witness.
So there are some students who would say that they're struggling to believe in God, or really trust God, trust the Bible, and maybe even for some intellectual reasons. And it sounds like your education was actually a help for you in coming to Christ. I was wondering, how you might counsel a student who would come with questions about God, why they could trust God or the Bible.
I do think education helps a lot, but as I say on the Meet the Prof website, there are centuries or millennia of illiteracy that demonstrates you don't have to be well educated, that the Spirit of God can move in you without that. But for me, I mean, that was a real path to understanding God, was the ability to not only read Scripture with the Holy Spirit guiding you, but also to understand some of the pieces around it, like going to Israel, for example, excuse me, and experiencing the geography, right, and the culture, and then being able to infuse that back into your reading is a learning experience that will enrich the way you read the Bible. But also reading other things, reading what some of the great people of faith have written about their own experiences. So C.S. Lewis is the prime example. This was people today don't know him or know how he struggled, but you can unpackage that in his works, and you can read that, and you can understand how that he had those questions. Like, this is C.S. Lewis, and he had the same questions you have. So those are perfectly normal questions, and God can handle them. And I do wonder sometimes, like, I don't know, because again, my experience started so late, like how many people are hindered because they were told that they shouldn't question. And you should question. Like, you should definitely question, and you should question with an authentic openness, and the ability to admit that you're wrong. And really go, if you go at it that way intellectually, there's just no other outcome. So it takes a heck of a lot more lack of reason to not believe in God than it does to believe in God at the end of the day. That's a lot harder thing to justify from an intellectual standpoint. And so that was helpful to me, to just to read what other people had written. And I'm a voracious reader, and so I have devoured things alongside scripture all the time.
Really?
And so if that's not your thing, there are other ways to do that, I'm sure, like podcasts, for example. Or, there are other ways to get at that. But open yourself up to the fact that God can handle your questioning, and you should question because it's healthy. And it will help you grow and develop your faith. And then be wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove. Some of the things you read or see or hear, or some of the things people say, you need to be open to checking those things too, because they're not always going to be healthy.
It's helpful.
One of the things I heard as the parent of a college student is not to be terrified when my college student asks questions.
Right.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah, so often as parents, we essentially want to protect from that. And really, that's probably how they're growing, is to question the things they've been taught.
If they don't question, they'll later on, they'll lose that faith in a catastrophic way and may not get it back. Have them question when they're young and build that faith. But the thing is too, and Spence, this is one of the hardest things for me. Like, I have 2 children and they're not mine. And I have to tell myself this all the time. Like, they are not yours. They are God's. And so stop trying to control it. Stop trying to control it, and trust that God can do great things with these young people, but you have to take your hands off the wheel a little bit. That's not easy.
No, we've got kids too. That's helpful advice.
It is tough.
I'm still working on it. So
me too. How old are your kids, by the way?
So I have to do some math in the head here. Our daughter will be 33 this year, and then our son just turned 21. He's a senior in college.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's great.
So you've done it. You have accomplished the task. You're almost there.
Yeah, we're empty nesters. I mean, we've embraced that phase in life. It's been
that's great.
Better than I thought it would be.
What do you enjoy the most about being an empty nester?
Not having to tell someone to clean up after themselves. Right? Like, our son was home for the summer, and I love him, and
it all came back.
I adore him, but it's like, okay, the house is clean, and if it's not, it's my fault, and I don't have anyone else to blame.
That's the problem, though. There's nowhere else to blame. There's nobody you can turn it on. So you're filled with this place with students who are trying to figure out what's next in their life. That's so much of university is trying to figure out what's next. And there's this thought in Christianity that you need to go be a pastor or a missionary or something. But you're proof that you can glorify God by being a university president or college professor. And we talked to. What advice do you give to students about how they can glorify God in their fields, or how they might even think about how to choose a profession and choose what to do?
Yeah, the young people who come to me, so one of the first things I will ask them is, if they're coming into the college, what's your major? My favorite answer is, I don't know. I don't want you to. I mean, it's okay.
Really?
Like, if you really, really know you want to be an accountant, I can live with that. Like, if that's just, that's what you were made to do. I don't think most people that age should know. And even when they're coming out the other side 4 years later, it's good for them to have a path, but I would encourage those students to be just open to trying the opportunities that come along. Because you don't, I mean, to get to your original question, which is how do you reach people? Do you have to be in actual ministry to do that? And I think we all know the answer is no. I'm going to tell you about a young woman I worked with well before I became a Christian. So, and this is nothing to do with college education, but I was waiting tables in Branson, Missouri, and I mean, it was just brutal. And it doesn't sound like a brutal job, but busloads of people would come in all the time, and we were just working so hard. And this young woman was the table busser, right? And I know her name is Bethany. She's the only person's name I remember from this job, and I worked there for a while. And she was one of the most kind and thoughtful and hardworking people I'd ever met. I think she was maybe 17 or something, and I wasn't much older. Just incredible. And I admired her, and I marveled at her countenance and her work ethic. And in hindsight, I know why she has that. But at the time, I didn't understand that. But she was working as though she was working under the Lord, blessing tables. And at the time, it meant something to me, but not for the right reason. In hindsight, it means the world to me to have had a chance to work with this young woman. I have no idea what happened to her, but she is the only person I worked with in that town whose name I remember.
Bethany.
So it doesn't matter. Bethany. I
And
don't know
you
where
knew
you are,
she
Bethany.
was a Christian?
Yeah, I knew she was a Christian, but I didn't know that was why she was how she was, because no one had ever. I mean, I knew nothing about it really, and she really was incredible. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can, God can shine through you no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. You sort of underscored the importance of being the aroma of Christ wherever you are, of projecting that. But you also underscored the need to be spiritually mature yourself to do that. I think you mentioned I wasn't prepared to teach older kids, so I went back and did, preschool. What do you say to the student who says, "Well, I'm a baby Christian, and I'm going to be an accountant. How can I possibly glorify God?" What do you say to that person?
Right? Like, you could be honest. That's a good start. You're an accountant and you're dealing with things that are really sensitive. And don't stay a baby Christian. And that was one thing, our pastor in Murfreesboro would say, it's fine to be a baby Christian, but you can't stay there forever. You can't keep drinking milk. You've got to eat food someday. So you have to intentionally invest in that spiritual growth, knowing that it's going to take time and that you need to be, you need to sort of be cognizant of the fact that there are things in places you don't belong right now because you're not ready. That doesn't mean you don't get ready. And so go in, work as though you're working under the Lord, treat people's resources the way you would want yours treated and the way God would treat them, and then mature. And we overcomplicate things sometimes, I think, too. And they're not really that complicated.
I think what you just said was do the work. And sometimes we don't want to hear that. Do the work to mature, do the work well that you're in. There's no magic bullet there.
And it's growth, right? And growth is hard, and it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's painful. But if it's easy, you're probably not actually growing.
Oh, great. Great word.
Well, I just feel like we've got such a valuable opportunity to pick your brain and get your advice on so many different things. And we see our audience as mainly being college students who would listen to this, but also other college professors, faculty, and staff, as well as parents or grandparents. And so we have a list of questions we'd love to ask your advice on for all of our groups. We call this our lightning round. So
great.
The first one, Karen, is what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Hang in there. There's a love that's coming that you don't understand, that's greater than anything you can imagine, and all you have to do is hang in there.
Hang in there. I love it. All right, so you've got a senior getting ready to leave the higher education bubble, go out in real life. What do you say to them?
I have one, actually.
All right.
This is his senior year. I wasn't going to
get a job.
That's actually not what I said. Don't stress it too much. There's a lot of pressure at that point in your senior year of college, I think. Like, how am I going to get it right? How am I going to do this or that? What's going to happen next? How do I? Take a deep breath, right? And understand that whatever path you end up on after you graduate you're not there for the rest of your life. You can go try something, and if you don't like it, don't be afraid to don't get into the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where you stay on a path that's bad. Don't stay in an area that you don't belong, but go try it first. And I know it's easy to say because I have a job and I've done all this already, but I had no plan. Like, I really had absolutely no plan. And parents won't want to hear that. So maybe you should have a little bit of a plan, but don't try to figure it all out. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. You're very young. You have a lot of life ahead of you and a lot of opportunity to change direction if you don't like the post-college direction immediately.
That sunk cost fallacy. I'd like to go back to that. I mean, that is the guy who did 6 years of accounting training, got his Mac, gets out there and realizes, I hate this. And so your advice is do it for a year, go find something else.
Yeah, well, and what I tell people too is, find something else while you're still doing it. It's a lot easier to figure. Right? Don't just quit your job and go, live on the street. But you start trying to figure out what it is that you actually do love while you're still in that place. Because there may be little pieces of that profession that actually were great. That you loved and that you can actually turn into something else. But don't stay there just because you've invested 6 years.
Hey, I would like to apologize to our listeners for picking on accountants. I feel like we have unduly picked on accountants in this show. My best friend's an accountant. So
I do it all the time because I use that as an example in the classroom. Like when I talk about what students want to do with their lives, like some people know they want to do that. I don't know why. It's the most boring thing I can imagine. And so apologies for me as well. I'm sure it's exciting for some of you.
We interviewed an accountant, Joe Brazel at NC State. So I think he gave us permission sort of to pick from.
Oh, good.
Well, you've already spoken some to Christian professors out there that saying some would want to let their students know the first day of class are a Christian, and for others there would be other ways to let students know. So what advice would you give to Christian professors who are trying to figure out the best way to represent Christ?
I think the best thing you can do as a professor in that regard is find other professors. Have a community of people who understand what you do. I had that at MTSU, and it was, like I said earlier, just one of the most valuable things about that experience was being able to be around those folks and just watch them and learn from them, and then read some of the advice that Faculty Commons gives. I mean, it's helpful. There is no one right way to do this. And ultimately, if you will be kind to your students and you will show them grace and love, you will be different. Because they're not getting that in every classroom. They're not getting that in the world right now. Just do that. If you can't think of anything else, just be kind and give people grace.
Yeah. Great. That's great. All right. So you've got 3 parents of college students in the room here. What advice would you give to the parent of a college student?
Pray for your child. I mean that in all seriousness. College is hard. And they're going to be confronted with things when they're away from home, especially if you've like I sent my son off to Minnesota, living on campus for 4 years. And they're just things that probably that he's seen or done or been a part of that I would not like. And I just pray. I pray that God protects him and that he surrounds him with people who will show him again why Christ is the answer, and that he will come out of that stronger and better, and talk to them. I mean, if your kids will talk to you, and mine do, have conversations and let them say the things that, like, I've watched my son sort of bounce the political spectrum over the last 3 years. It's been really fun, but it's been hard because, there are times where I think we get in arguments all the time in the first year or two about how ridiculous communism is. And so just sort of watching him bounce around on that and being a part of that has been a real joy for me as an educator. But pray and listen.
What strikes me is anybody can pray for their kids. Like, that is something everybody can do today. That's great.
Karen, thank you so much. This is so fun. And I just feel like this is so valuable. Thank you for taking this time. Thanks for being there for the students and your faculty and staff. And we really appreciate just getting a little bit more of a window into your life and God's work in your life. So thank you for sharing all this.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a joy to have the conversation. And I'll make one plea to anyone who listens to this. You even if you don't have college students, if you don't have children in college, you know people, or you have colleges in your community, pray for them. Pray for the college campuses in your community. Pray for the students and the faculty and the leadership, because these institutions are really vital to the future of our country. And our country will not do well if our institutions are not strong and healthy.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Karen, even half as much as we enjoyed interviewing her. And she is so qualified to speak to us. I mean, she has been a college student herself. She's been a college professor. She's sent off a child to college, and now she's a college president. So, man, I really appreciate her emphasis on prayer at the end and asking us all to pray for college campuses. And so if you would like to email Karen, she's given us permission to put her email address in the episode of the podcast. So you can find it in this episode in the description. And please don't forget to like or subscribe or follow the podcast. And if you would like to give financially to this ministry, thank you very much. And you can give online at give.cru.org/0424344. So thank you again. And until next time, we hope this encourages you to have a Christ-centered conversation.